Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're kicking off our culture guide for Humankind with the Ancient Era. As with all eras in the game, there will be a total of 10 different cultures available for selection, and we'll be discussing each of them by alphabetic order. If you're only interested in a certain particular culture from the Ancient Era, feel free to skip ahead using the timestamp provided below. Now, let's get things kicked off with the Assyrians, who represents the expansionist affinity. Now, there are a total of 7 affinities in the game, and they simply allow you to earn more points specializing in their particular playstyle. For the expansionists, you earn more fame points when you attach more territories to your cities. And with each affinity, there is also going to be a preset action and bonus that's going to be the same across all eras. Since we're covering the ancient eras first, we'll go through them in great detail, and in future era guides, we'll be skipping over these. As expansionist affinity, you have an action called Under One Banner. This basically allows you to annex foreign territories occupied by other empires' outposts and administrative centers, and this plays into your expansionist playstyle by allowing you to claim land that you didn't get to claim, and save you a bit of influence but can pull you into wars. Your affinity bonus is called Ambition. It allows your unit to always trespass enemy land even after they form cities and hard borders. So these will definitely all synergize with your desire to expand. And looking at the legacy trait for the Assyrians in particular, we have something called the Raid Masters. And this essentially gives all your land unit +1 movement and +5 combat strength when ransacking on army. So this means if you have an army ransacking an enemy district or any sites such as the administrative center or even animal sanctuary, you'll get +5 combat strength if someone chooses to attack you when you're performing the ransack action. This is actually a huge bonus if you are invading enemy territory and performing pillages, because combat strength difference in the game actually plays a big role in terms of the actual fighting, and 5 points is actually a huge amount for all units in your army. The +1 land movement is also quite significant, and if you're hoping to play a very pillaging and harassing playstyle throughout your gameplay, the Assyrians Raid Masters is definitely very helpful. As for their emblematic district, this is a district that you can only build during this era. After you progress to the next culture, the emblematic district will disappear. You'll get the Dunon, which is basically a garrison. You get +10 points of district fortification where you built this. You can build this anywhere on your land without adjacency to existing district. And all units can be spawned here, land units, and they will receive +1 combat strength either in the district or adjacent to this district. You get +2 influence, but sadly, unlike garrison districts, you will not be getting +5 points of stability. This is a questionable district to build. It is obviously really good in certain geographic choke points on your borders. You'll be able to receive the defensive bonus. A little bit of influence never hurts, and the combat strength obviously helps if you're in a defensive war. But the most essential part of this building is actually that it's a spawn point, so it allows you to raid foreign land more effectively. On defense, it doesn't really play into your culture. You want to be on offense. You want to be claiming more territories. You want to reduce your enemy's strength by stealing their land before they can make them into cities. So this is more of a defensive building. It doesn't provide any stability, which I think is an oversight. I feel like if they are going to balance this building, they should add at least some sort of stability bonus to encourage you to build it. Obviously, as an emblematic district in future eras with different cultures, you could get adjacency bonuses to other buildings and you can plan them out because emblematic districts will pick up special traits. They're treated very differently. So that's a good thing, but as a standalone garrison comparison, I feel like it is actually quite weak. As for your unit, the Assyrian Raiders, this is a very strong unit. If you look at the prerequisite, it requires you to have a horse and domestication, which is a tier 1 tech, means it's available right off from the beginning of the game. So you'll be able to unlock this unit fairly fast, and you really want to look for horse resource in your beginning territories, whether it's your first city or the first territory you want to attach to your city, because this is a very powerful unit. It replaces the Scout Rider and has more combat strength than the unit. I believe 5 more points of combat strength. I think Scout Riders have 16, if I'm not mistaken. And if you are using this unit to pillage, which is a special trait, you get to generate more money when destroying an enemy outpost or independent camp, meaning when you're ransacking them. The weakness of this unit, obviously, is that it's a cavalry unit, so spearmen will do more damage to you, but you will do more damage to enemy range unit, and you can ignore enemy zone control unless they have a trait that prevents you from that ignoring. You're unable to climb fortifications. That is probably the biggest weakness for all cavalry unit in the game, because once they have a palisade up, you can no longer attack those cities because you cannot get through the defenses. So you're essentially sitting duck. If they have a range unit outside, inside, you're just going to get pinged down and killed slowly. But you're not really there to attack enemy cities. The design of this unit and this culture is to pillage their territories to help you expand. So combined with the +5 strength when you're ransacking, you're at 26 strength from a tier 1 unit. We say tier 1 not that it's best, but because it's available from the first line of the tech available in the game. So nothing can really match you. And spearmen are not available at the beginning. And even if they have spearmen are 18 military strength or combat strength units. If you have your bonuses stacked, you'll be at 26. They'll still have a very difficult time fighting your unit. So this is a fairly powerful early game unit with very low upkeep that can help you earn quite a bit of money and territory, which all builds into your playstyle. So that's going to be the Assyrians for you, and this is what their clothing looks like. Moving on to our next culture, we'll be looking at the Babylonians, and they will be the only science culture in the ancient era, just as the Assyrians are the only expansionist culture. There are 7 affinities, therefore there's going to be 3 repeats, and 4 of them are going to be the only option in the era. In this case, the Babylonians are the only option for science. And speaking of science affinities, they earn more stars when researching more technologies, earning their scientist era stars. They have one affinity action called the Collective Minds, which will turn your industry and money production in any given city into science for at least the next 5 turns. This is definitely an interesting approach to the game. Now, turning money and industry into science is probably not a bad choice if you have developed cities where you don't have much to build and you want to just rush ahead to a science lead. And we'll also talk about how this synergizes with their Brilliant Philosopher's legacy trait. But their other affinity bonus is called Foresight, allowing you to research technologies from one era ahead. This is quite powerful. Or else, your specialties in science, amount or research amount, production, it's just basically the number of science you have, will actually bottleneck you when you finished all the technology in the current era and you haven't earned enough stars to advance to the next one, since at the most you can earn 3 stars for each type. So after you maxed out your tech for your era, but you don't have the other 4 stars, your science might be going to waste. In this case, with Foresight for all scientist affinity cultures, you can research ahead, which is super powerful. And you get the Brilliant Philosophers to kind of compound these effects by allowing you to pick up +2 science per research technology on capital throughout the game. So this bonus is going to get progressively larger as you progress in the game for each science you have researched, for each tech you have picked up. It will only provide that bonus on your capital. So scaling wise, it's actually quite poor. If you're going wide, most of your other cities will not be picking up this benefit. And in the late game, there's less than a total of 100 technologies in the game so far, and you'll be getting less than 200 points of science from this legacy trait, which is still a decent amount, but given how easy it is to get science districts or special emblematic districts focused on science in the late game that are super powerful, this amount falls off quite significantly to the point where it's really just not going to matter. So it is great in the early game because even 2 extra science or 4 extra science in the early game, when science costs for technologies are quite low, can have a significant impact on the gameplay, and you can run ahead with a science lead. Your unique emblematic district is called the Astronomy House. This is a dual resource exploitation district. It counts as both a farmer quarter and a research quarter. And anytime you see sort of a dual exploitation or triple exploitation or even all four, they're really good districts. The reason being is you can create adjacency effects with multiple quarters. You can also save the exploitation of tiles where you haven't really exploited by building a district on them, but they're adjacent to the said district, in this case, the astronomy house. Then you can retain both the food and the science on that tile. Or else if you just build a farmer's quarter, then any other yield other than food will disappear from that adjacent tile. In this case, you can keep 2. So things like geysers, you can basically get a lot of science out of them. It has the -10 stability, which is shared with most districts in the game. You have +3 science per adjacent farmer quarter. And on cities and outposts where you have this, your researchers will generate 1 additional food and 1 additional science. You also get 1 additional researcher slot. Researchers are essentially jobs inside your cities, so it allows you to have another slot for another researcher, and each researcher will give you more food and more science. It's pretty decent. And the adjacency bonus being given to the farmer's quarter allow you to mix and match with different playstyles down the line, where if you go agrarian perhaps in the next era, you can build your unique farmer quarter next to this, and both of them will receive additional bonuses. It's quite powerful. And the fact that you want to focus on population growth while still gaining quite a bit of science is definitely very powerful. The most adjacencies you can create on this obviously will be the 6 tiles because it's a hexagon map, and you can get up to 18 points of science on this building. Now you have to realize inherently this building doesn't provide any passive science or food boost, so you're really dependent on the bonuses from the adjacency, and that's going to play into how you want to place this building. So at the maximum, this building is worth 18 science just from the district, plus whatever existing food and science that's on the tile. And you'll also be able to pick up additional food and science for each researcher you have in the city. And since researchers are sort of the luxury job, which you fill after you have decent amount of farmers and workers, you're going to want a big population city to help sustain this. But overall, still a very good early game science building because there's not many of them. Remember, this is the only science culture available in the ancient era. Then your unique unit is the Sabu Sa Questi, and this unit is a defensive spearman replacement unit that is available a little bit later on the tech tree. You get this after you unlock bronze working, which requires 2 prerequisite tech, and you have a copper requirement. Copper requirement. It is fairly strong unit replacement for the spearman. We mentioned the spearman had 18 combat strength. This unit has 22. It does cost more, upkeep of 3 instead of I think 1. You do have additional trait in Guardian, which makes you stronger when standing on friendly district, so you're a defensive unit. And I think the Guardian combat strength bonus is 4 points. And you have anti-cav, so you're stronger against enemy cavalry. So definitely a very strong defensive unit against most of the powerful cavalry unit available in the ancient era, or even beyond. At 22 strength plus anti-cav plus guardian, you can probably take on most of the cavalry unit even from the classical era. But nothing really to talk about this unit. It's pretty plain as a melee unit, nothing fancy here. And the fact that it's higher tech doesn't really hinder you that much because you are a science-focused culture. So moving on from the Babylonians, we're going to look at the Egyptians, which is going to be the only builder-focused affinity culture in the ancient era. And as a builder affinity, you will earn more points for the number of district you build. Your action's called the Land Raiser. It turns your money and science into industry for the next 5 turns. This is actually a significant trade-off because when you turn off all science, you're no longer researching any new tech. And for these 5 turns, unless you're trying to rush a particular building, and in Humankind, there's not really any building worth rushing because you're not competing for wonder builds with other factions, because once you claim a wonder, only you can build it. So it's very rare for me to pick out an opportunity where I would want to give up all my science for industry. Of course, you could have a multiple city structure later on in the game where you go beyond your initial city, perhaps even your initial 2 cities, and you can sacrifice a few cities that has good money output to have great industry to help share projects. That's probably the only time I think this will be worth it. As for the affinity bonus, you get pride. You'll gain 10 points of stability when completing a district construction. This allows you to spam district all the time, because at worst, a district's going to cost you 10 stability, and with a builder affinity faction, you're able to spam them out very quickly without impacting the stability of your cities. Now, obviously, the weakness here would be when you switch away from a builder affinity in a future era, all those stability from pride will go away, and you have to deal with your stability problem down the line. And if you overbuild by too much, you're going to have too big of a hole to fill. So that's something you do have to pay attention to. As for the legacy trait for the Egyptians, we have something called the Grand Planners. This is a very powerful legacy trait. I think one of the most powerful legacy traits available in the ancient era and even beyond, because you get +1 industry on all existing tiles that are producing industry. That one's not significant, but this one, -10% on district industry cost. This is for all district going forward in the game. So even if you don't play a builder focused culture moving forward, you're still going to be building quite a bit of districts to expand your cities, to build your emblematic districts, and saving 10% can be very significant during the course of a game. So just this alone is quite powerful. And the fact that if you grab the Pyramid Wonder, you'll be able to reduce this amount by another 25%, making essentially all your districts 35% cheaper, or around 1/3 the cost, and you can pretty much get ahead using districts. Speaking of emblematic districts, we have the Egyptian Pyramid. This is a Maker's Quarter. You get +1 influence, you get +3 industry over the existing amount of industry provided on the tile you build it on. You will lose -10 stability as with a normal Maker District or Maker's Quarter, but you have adjacencies with other Maker's Quarter that is +3. Obviously, this can be expanded with buildings like the Forge. Infrastructure building can make this adjacency even stronger, but the base adjacency is +3. So the maximum we can get here is 18 from the adjacency, +3 from the base, and whatever amount of industry on the tile that you build it on. You also get +1 worker slot in the city or outpost where you built this, and it counts as a Maker's Quarter for future adjacencies. Overall, pretty simple building, but pretty powerful in the early game in terms of putting out high industry. The 1 influence is also kind of nice. It's just the added bonus for you to enjoy. Like if they make this even without the influence, it will still be a great building, but with the influence, it's just a little bit of icing on top. As for our unique unit, the Makarabas, this is available after your research wheel. So once again, it is kind of a late ancient era technology, requires a horse, but fairly a powerful unit replacing the standard chariot. It becomes a range unit, and it has move and fire, means you can perform attack and then make a move afterward. So you can kind of share one ideal location. Perhaps you have one highland that you can shoot the enemy from with no line of sight penalty. Then you can just cycle your Makaraba units to walk in there, shoot, walk out, have another one come in, shoot, and then walk out. And since you're ranged, they can't really hit back. But if the enemy do come up to you and hit you in melee, you will be taking more damage. So that is typical weakness for all range units. And moving on, we are going to be covering the Harappans, which is the agrarian affinity culture. And it's the only agrarian affinity culture in the ancient era. And as agrarian focused affinity, you earn more points by growing your population. And your actions called greener pastures And when you're using this, you're essentially stealing population from nearby territories. The more adjacent territories you have, whether friendly or foe, you'll be able to suck more population into your city. And you also gain 5 stability whenever you gain a population from a bonus called community. So it allows you to build bigger district cities or more districts in a city, essentially using the stability bonus to help you combat the instability from building additional districts. These actions, you have to kind of pick and choose your, timing for these. You don't want to have grievances against a faction that's eager to go to war with you. They'll use that for war support and go to war with you when you're not prepared. So definitely weigh your current situation for when you want to use this or not. Of course, if all the adjacent territories are friendly and not attached, then it's just free population for the city, so nothing lost there. And you have the fertile intuition, which will be your legacy trait. You get +1 food on tiles producing food, very similar to the Egyptian style, but you get +1 food on river. So here we have a culture that is going to be impacted heavily by your terrain when picking things. If you don't have river on your land when you start the game, the Harappans are not a good choice. If you have massive amount of river network through your land, then the Harappans would be a godly choice because of the number of food you can get on rivers and the fact that rivers are generally really strong in the game because you can get things like irrigation, hydraulics to get about +4 food on any existing river tile or +4 industry if you go down a bit later in terms of the eras. So these bonuses will stack up and become quite powerful. You can have a huge food focused faction with the Harappans quite easily. Their unique emblematic district is also very powerful. It is very similar to the Egyptians once again. +3 base food, -10 stability, +3 food per adjacent farmer quarter. Counts as a farmer's quarter and also gives you 1 farmer slot. It does not have the +1 influence that the pyramids do. So that part is a bit different. But overall, this has the special added bonus of the land that you built this on will be considered as a river. So you don't have to build this on a river. You build this anywhere on non-river tile, which is what you should do because you don't want to waste this bonus. And that tile will be counted as a river tile because it's a canal network. And any infrastructure that will give bonuses to river or have adjacencies to river, this would count. And that is why this district is fairly strong and you can pick and choose where you want to place this on the map because there are certain wonders that can be only built next to rivers. And if you want the wonders in a certain place, you can use canal networks to kind of cheat the system and create a river where there is even no adjacent river. The game doesn't care if there's adjacencies for this emblematic district. You'll just create a river wherever you built this and you get all the bonuses for that. So just because of that, this is probably even better than the pyramid, even though all the bonuses look about the same and you don't even get the influence. Your unique unit, the runners. So you see here, there's no prerequisite tech because what will happen is that your scouting party will become runners once you advance to the ancient era. It's automatic. And if you look at the unit, it's a fairly weak unit because it doesn't require anything. 14 combat strength is extremely low. Scouting parties have I think 13. So you get a 1 point bonus, you get a 1 movement bonus, and you get the Pathfinder bonus, which ignores movement penalties from forest. It is basically a slightly better scout, and that's about it. You're not going to depend on these guys for combat. They're simply much weaker. If you're looking for an early game aggressive unit, this would not be the culture you pick because the Assyrians with their Raider Master or Master Raiders legacy trait will give +1 movement to all units. So your scout will be, at 5 movement, just like the runners. You won't have the Pathfinder bonus, but you'll get +5 combat strength when you're ransacking. So if you're hoping to apply early pressure, runners is really not the way to go, especially on higher difficulty, because at that point, the AI will receive additional combat strength bonus even for their scouting parties, and they will often have 17 combat power. So your runners can't even beat them. So it does have some problems. Another good thing about this unit, it's free upkeep because it will just turn all the existing scouting parties, which are free upkeep, into this unit. So just a nice early scouting unit to cover big maps, especially heavily forested maps. And then we can move on to the Hittites, which is one of two militaristic affinity factions, the other one being the Mycenaeans right next to them. And if we look at the militaristic affinity, we'll earn more stars by killing more enemy units. And we can periodically call upon patriots to take up arms in defense of the motherland. This is called Iron Reserve. It'll take your population and turn them into basic units to help you fight in defensive battles. You'll get the affinity bonus called Vigilance, which will increase your equilibrium value on war support to 30 points. Not to 30 points, but plus 30 points. So usually the equilibrium is at 50. Means each turn you'll earn about 2 points of war support against any given faction. And once you hit 50, you need additional things to happen to boost it. Grievances and such. In this case, for all militaristic factions, their passive equilibrium is at 80. So if you don't do anything for about 40 turns, you'll hit that point. As a matter of fact, you don't have to wait that long because you start out at 50, so about 15 turns, you'll hit the maximum. So when you go to war with a certain faction, you have more war support to spend or to earn because at the end of a war, you'll be spending your war support to ask for, awards, whether it's territories or money. So having a high war support definitely help you both in terms of starting a war as well as the rewards you get at the end of a war. And those are basically the militaristic bonuses. As for legacy trait, the Hittites has a very straightforward one, lust for war, +1 combat strength. It's okay. It's nothing too great to mail home about. Obviously, you prefer to have the 1 combat strength, but that's nothing super special. The Wari is their unique district. This is not one you have to build. As you can see, it exploits all resources because it's just an outpost capital. It replaces basically your administrative center on the outpost. And the bonus you have on this is that it will act as a land unit spawn. You don't have to build these. If you have existing territories, they'll automatically upgrade to the Wari, and they will act the same as any outposts except for the fact that you can spawn unit on it. It'll be a spawn point. So if you're pushing a forward war, you can have a territory at the ready and spawn your units there as an easier transport option, especially in the ancient era when road systems are not really developed until you get the wheel technology. As for your unique unit, you have the Gigar, which is once again a chariot replacement. It requires the wheel. You have to have both a horse resource and a copper resource, and is considered a heavy cav. The difference between heavy cav and regular cav is that you are able to charge enemies, and you're going to receive additional combat strength if you are charging, which means you're not attacking someone who is adjacent to you at the start of turn. So you want to run around a little bit, flank, and hit someone who's not adjacent to you, and just by doing that, you get additional combat strength. Once again, as a cavalry, you cannot climb fortifications, and you're going to be weak towards spear units. You will also apply suppression, which means the unit you hit cannot move the next turn and has reduced combat strength. These bonuses are great when you're working with ranged allies. So the idea here is even though the Gigar is not going to be one of those holding down this choke point type of unit, you can use the flanking maneuvers to ping down enemy melee units or wipe out enemy range units, and hopefully they cannot move into your range unit the next turn. Obviously, you still need to place your range unit a little bit farther away from them. Even with suppression, if you put it right next to them, they can still attack you. But in the case of targeting range unit, they will have less combat strength as well. So overall, it's a very synergetic ability, works well with a mixed army composition where you have some range and some melee. In this case, you might not need melee, you might just go with the Gigar, which is a heavy cavalry. The combat strength here is not super high at 23, but it's pretty decent. 6 movement because it is a chariot unit. 3 upkeep, all very reasonable in this era. So moving on from the Hittites, we'll talk about the other militaristic option. We're not going to be covering the bonuses because it's exactly the same. And this is the Mycenaeans, the Proto-Greeks. And they have a very nice legacy trait. They're called the Brutal Uprisings. You get minus 20% on unit industry cost forever in the game. Very similar to the Egyptian bonus, anytime you have a minus percentage cost that is going to last you throughout the course of the game, the benefit can be immense if this is the playstyle you're going after. And in this case, it'll make your units just straight up cheaper. 20% cheaper is actually quite significant. It doesn't say land unit either, so all military units going forward will be cheaper, even if you're building nukes in the last era. So that's how strong this is if you're going for a very militaristic playstyle. You also get plus 25 points of experience on creating units on cities or outposts. So whenever you are creating a new unit and they're going to be created on a city or outpost, you get 25 points of experience. The reason why they say this is sometimes you have a curiosity event that spawns a unit that's not created on city or outpost, so you don't get that bonus there. And 25 experience is going to help you gain veterancy, and veterancy is going to just increase your combat strength. The combat stats in the game is quite straightforward in that you just have the combat strength as your only stat, so there's really not too much to talk about this. Veterancy just gives you +1, I believe. And our unique emblematic district, the Cyclopean Fortress. This is the nightmare of your dreams if enemy AI factions built this next to your land. This is a garrison replacement, but counts as a maker's quarter. It has passively +3 industry, and it can exploit local industry resources. So for example, if you place this on a rocky plain with adjacent mountains, you'll pick up a bunch of industries. And you can place this anywhere without adjacency because it counts as a garrison. And not only that, it provides 15 points of stability instead of 5 points from a regular garrison, and 20 points of district fortification instead of 10 points. And also, all units in or adjacent to this district will get +3 combat strength, and all enemy armies within one range of this tile will have reduced movement range. That is just gonna be insane. And we've seen a garrison emblematic district already when we looked at the Assyrians, and I said that one's nothing. And because something like this exists, this is incredibly powerful. You get production, you get spawn point, you get heavy fortification, you also get incredible amount of combat strength for your units, and you slow down enemy armies. What more can you want from a garrison? Triple the stability from a regular garrison as well. So absolutely incredible in terms of emblematic district. If you're playing aggressive faction or even defensive, this can function as both, because you're always going to place this on your border with another faction, right? You can stop their armies from moving into you, you make your army stronger, and you have a border fight, this is going to help you win with the +3 combat strength. And you don't really mind spamming these. You get industry, you get stability. You don't lose anything. And the bonus from Brutal Uprising definitely make the Mycenaeans one of the most powerful military-focused early game cultures in the game. Their unit, the Pro Machio, only requires city defense, which is a tier 1 tech, gives you 21 points. They replace warriors. Warriors have 19 combat strength, so having 21 points here means you get a 2-point bonus. They cost much more in terms of upkeep. Instead of 1, they become 3. But you get something called a champion trait, means you're stronger when attacking during the first turn. So essentially, you are stronger when you are attacking, because your first round when attacking means you go first, and you get to hit hard in the beginning. The bonus, I think, is 2 or 3 points. Actually, I don't remember. But it just makes your combat strength higher, and after that, you fall back. So you're the initial shock attack, and you get these units fairly fast. Nothing can really match you in the early game, because of the fact that you get these so early that the enemy is going to have a harder time defending against you. Of course, on higher difficulty, this just makes things a more even between you. And they did do a good job of trying to balance these, because the upkeep cost is much higher at 3 points rather than 1 point of gold or money. So that's the Mycenaeans for you, and the last of the militaristic affinity in the ancient era. And moving on, we have the Nubians, which is one of the two merchant affinities in the game for the ancient era. And the Nubians, in terms of merchant affinity, means you earn more fame points by earning more money. And your affinity action is called the Power Investor. Here you can trade influence to kind of work on a resource deposit, and you either create an extractor, meaning you'll finish the artisan quarter, or in terms of strategic resource, you have a special extractor building there, or just basically a quarter will be made there, or district. And if you already have an existing one, or if it's foreign, you'll make money instead. So you're trading influence either for production or for money, and you'll get farther bonuses for those land after you extract them if they're on friendly territory. In terms of your affinity bonus, meditation, you allow empires to pay you rather than the original owner for access to a resource that you have bought. So what this means is you want to trade with as many factions as you can. You want to buy all their resources, and you become the market. You're the middleman. If any other empire want to buy that resource, they can now buy it from you, even though you're not the original source of the resource. So this is actually quite interesting. You can have a great relationship structure just through trade with all existing factions, and you can benefit heavily from that by selling resources that you have bought from other factions, receiving their benefits in terms of stability and whatever other bonus the luxury resource provide, and then turn around, sell it for money, all the same to another faction. And speaking of these resources, our Golden Dreams legacy trait is quite nice in that it gives 5 money on all luxury resource and strategic resource deposit that we have a quarter on. Obviously, you can't just earn it if you're not working the tile. But this is quite great because once you build those quarters, they always exploit all resources. So you'll get these +5 money, and +5 money is actually quite significant, even in the early game or the late game, because it's a cumulative effort. Your wealth is going to build up depending on the amount of surplus you have each turn after you take out upkeeps, and +5 is going to be quite significant. So when picking out land you want to settle as the Nubians, they're also quite geographically dependent. You want to pick places with multiple sites of luxury, which are represented by diamond-shaped icons on the map, or you want to pick sites that are heavy in strategic, which are represented by diamond, not diamond shape, I guess it'll still be called diamond shape. It's kind of the 4-sided diamond, pin bob. Kind of like a parallelogram, but I think it's also called a diamond shape. But anyways, you want to just pick out those icon markers on the map, and each of them are going to be worth at least 5 money for you. I say at least because we have a unique emblematic district called the Miro Pyramids, named after the city of Miro and the Nubian culture, of course. And we get plus industry and plus money, 2 points of each, because it exploits both resources. It counts as both in terms of market quarter and maker's quarter. It only provides you a trader slot, so it's more market quarter than maker quarter, but you'll make more money for having adjacent maker's quarter as well. So this is quite interesting because you can place these in conjunction with your resources, which will boost the money on those resources because you're exploiting the nearby land. And then if you build more makers around them, you also get more money. And for the Nubians, it's kind of a mix between production and money. And if you think about what money can do in the game, you can buy production by speeding up constructibles. You can also buy technology by osmosis from nearby factions who are ahead on tech. Because once you get the osmosis effect, you can either just get a free small amount of technology benefit, or you can pay a certain amount of money and pick up the tech entirely. So money can buy a lot of things, and the slogan for the Nubian is anything under the sun can be exchanged for enough gold. The only thing you can't really buy are population. So food is still something you have to pay attention to, but aside from that, the bonuses from the Mural Pyramids are still quite powerful. Then our unique unit, the Tesseti Archers. So these are archer replacement requiring carpentry. The base archer, I believe, have 15 combat strength. Here we have 19, so quite a significant boost. No upkeep increase, and we get additional trait called the exceptional accuracy, meaning we will never be penalized for clear line of sight. This essentially means your archer is lower elevation than the enemy unit, your archer has another unit standing between you and the target, and the amount that you will lose for this is 4 points of combat strength. So for the Tesseti archers, you'll never lose those 4 points. You can fire from anywhere you want as long as they're within the 3 range limit, and you can hit them at your maximum amount, even if the terrain's not favorable or even if there's another unit blocking your sight to the target. So quite nice, quite a powerful replacement unit at the same cost. Those are always nice to see. Then moving on, we have the Olmec, which is the first aesthetic affinity, or basically influence-based affinity, and you get more points for earning more influence points. And your affinity action is called Cultural Blitz, where you can spend money to promote patriotic works of art, changing the territory's influence back to yours. And they also help you generate more influence. Of course, the enemy or the foreign faction with high influence can reclaim it if they have high enough influence, but essentially you're trading your cash or your money for influence here. You also get affinity bonus of called Grace, which means ideology proximity is always maxed out. This is a bonus you get in terms of having adjacencies to other factions. You'll basically see how your ideology matches with theirs, especially with independent factions, independent camps. That'll come into play once you get a few of them on your border, and this will help you stay maxed out on those bonuses. So it's really nice with Independent City in particular, and you might want to use your additional influence to absorb them later on in your game. Now, as for the legacy bonus, we just get +1 influence on territory. So all our territories would just passively generate one more. It's not super good, but if you, say, expand heavily and claim a lot of territories, it could add up. Depending on the map size, I think it will play a different role. It is quite hard to get influence early on, so this definitely helps more than it hurts you, for example. Our unique emblematic district is the Olmec head. It counts as a farmer quarter, and essentially it is a farmer quarter with +3 food, except for the adjacency bonus is influence. You will still have the passive farmer quarter adjacency. It's just in addition to that, this Olmec head will produce more influence per adjacent farmer quarter. So essentially you can get up to 6 points plus the 1 point passive, 7 point total from each Olmec head. And once again, since influence is quite hard to earn in the early game, this will help you quite a bit, adding on to your natural harmony. And there's nothing too crazy about the Olmec head aside from this. Your unique unit is the Javelin Throwers. They're once again our archer replacement, similar to what we just saw with the Tassetti archers. They have 19 combat strength, 1 upkeep, all the same, but their special bonus slightly different. They have what's called the Ambusher trait. Makes them stronger on forest tiles. So if you're standing on a forest tile when you are attacking or defending, you're going to have bonus to your combat strength. I believe that bonus is 2 points. So if you have a lot of forest areas, you basically be a 21 combat strength unit. But you can't really always create those opportunities, but it does make it quite interesting where you might want to place your unit. But you also have to consider things like high ground bonus, which are worth 4 points. And most high ground, at least the super high elevation, 3-tier land, are usually not forested. So that's definitely also something to consider, especially for range unit that want clear line of sight. But overall, still a very annoying unit to deal with, especially on defense, because they could just be standing on forest and they passively get 2 more points. And in the early game, a 21 point combat strength unit is very hard to deal with because these only require the tier 1 tech. So if you're comparing them to, say, a warrior at 19 or a spearman at 18 or a scout rider at 16, even though the scout rider has a bonus against range, if you're at 21, you're going to be stronger than them even after that bonus applies. So quite a powerful unit. Then moving on to the Phoenicians, another merchant affinities. We're not going to talk about the merchant affinity bonus. As for the legacy trait, we have the trading pioneer. For each trader in our city or outpost, we get +2 money. Trader is a job. So like the farmer, like the maker, you have the trader and the researchers. And traders will passively generate money for your city, and they will additionally increase 2 points with your legacy bonus. It's okay, because similar to any sort of researcher bonus, you can really only afford to have traders and researchers once you have enough food. So farmers are quite important in the game because you can't sustain a high population without a lot of farm. So once you do have that in place, this will carry on and be stronger, perhaps in the late game when you have a huge, heavily populated city. As for their unique emblematic district, we have the Haven. As with all harbor, and this one is really a harbor replacement, you can exploit all nearby coastal water resources. So that's why it exploits all those resources there. And it will reduce 10 stability, very normal, plus 2 money per adjacent coastal water. So obviously this maxes out at 10 points, not 12, because you must be at least adjacent to one piece of land to build your harbor. And you have plus 2 money per adjacent lake in case you're building this inside a lake where you don't have, ocean tiles around. Also max out at 10 points if you have this, little peninsula of land jutting out. Usually you're not going to have a full 5 adjacency. You also get plus 1 trader. It counts as farmers and market. That in particular is actually quite important because naturally speaking, harbor districts or harbor quarters have adjacency bonus with existing market quarters on land. So the Haven retaining that is quite nice. Means if you build market districts around it or market quarters around it, you can get adjacencies normally with the land portion. But if you're thinking about, I want to max out adjacent coastal waters, then I can't have that many adjacency land. I would have only 1 adjacency land if I have 5 adjacency water. So there's a trade-off here where the 2 of them are kind of mutually exclusive. So you're never going to earn too much from this. So that's something you have to consider. In terms of the farmer quarter adjacency, that just means if you are going to end up putting a farm on that one piece of land that you're connected to or multiple pieces of land, you can still get bonuses with adjacencies from there with different infrastructure buildings or just natural adjacency bonuses. Still, pretty interesting harbor district that you can use as your unique emblematic one. Then moving on to Byram, that is going to be your unique unit here. You have a 23 strength 4 movement ship, and it comes as a boarding vessel. That's just pretty standard for this period of naval combat. The navigator trait is what's going to be cool here. Damage by consecutive turns spent in deep water. That is essentially means this is the ancient era ship. If you stand in deep water for 2 turns, you will take damage. This goes away once you have better ships down the line, but essentially this is just a ship with higher strength. You need to research sailing for it. I think unless you're playing a heavily naval map with a lot of coastal waters and nearby islands with other cultures, you're not really going to go into naval situations. So this makes the Phoenician kind of a niche culture where you only want to pick them if you're on kind of a heavily ocean-focused map. If you're not on one of those maps, I don't see a benefit to picking the Phoenicians because you're missing out on a lot of potential powerful units. Getting a more powerful ship could be meaningless when your land are getting taken from regular infantry units. So that's just something to consider. And as we move on, we have our last culture, the Zhou, which is once again a Thetics culture focused on influence. So we won't be talking about that since we already covered them. Their legacy trait is called the harmonious thought. It provides +2 stability on all districts. At first glance, this might seem like nothing, but I think this is actually super powerful for a lot of different playstyles because district building is quite essential in the game, and +2 stability is fairly strong. If you think about it this way, most districts either produce no instability or provides a little bit depending on garrison, so +5, or in this case for Confucian School +8, or if they're considered a normal district, it would be -10, right? So the amount of damage you take from instability is essentially -10 per district, normally. If you build a certain special district, or if you're building common quarter, you're building garrison to help combat the loss of stability, then you're going to get positive stability from a district. But normally, most resource producing districts are -10. So if they're usually -10, with the harmonious thought, you're getting +2 on them. They become -8. So now, when you build 5 districts, you're paying the instability cost of what would be 4 districts. So essentially, you're allowing yourself to build cities with 25% more districts if you're only building negative instability districts, right? So in the worst case scenario, you're gaining 25% additional districts. In the best case scenario, when you build something like the garrison, instead of getting 5 points, you're getting 7. When you build something like Confucian School, instead of getting 8 points, you're getting 10. So you're actually allowing your city to grow probably 50% or even more in terms of the district size. So you can have some really well-developed tall cities when playing as the Zhou down the line. Now, the most interesting thing about the Zhou is, despite their focus on influence, none of their trait and legacy bonuses are based on influence, emblematic districts. Their emblematic district is the Confucian School. Similar to their harmonious thought, it will provide 8 points of stability, which with the harmonious thought will be 10 points essentially. It erases one -10 district, but you don't have -10 districts, you have only -8 districts. So it's just going to be great overall. So if you build the school plus a maker's quarter, they cancel out, and you still have a +2 on top of that because the Confucian School is actually +10. So you can see how this bonus will add up quite nicely. You are heavily constrained by terrain when playing as the Zhou. If you don't have mountains, then the Zhou is not worth picking, because their unique building is considered a research quarter that gets 5 additional science per adjacent mountain. Now, it's almost impossible, I think it's impossible, to pick a 6 adjacent mountain setting. You can't have a ring of mountain with a land in the middle. So the most you can get from this is 5. And that's 25 science from adjacency plus 1 science base. That's incredible in the early game. We looked at Babylonians, who had adjacency, but not this high, right? Their adjacency is to additional farmer quarter. I think it's 2 points for each one. Could be 3. Actually, I think it's 2. But here you get 5 points, which is just incredible. And you don't have to do anything. The adjacency on the mountain is just passed on to the Confucian School. You do have to give up quite a bit though, because you're only exploiting science. So the mountain tiles are actually giving up their industry yield when you are putting the Confucian School next to them. Because if you typically put a maker's quarter, you pick up at least 3 points, maybe 4 points of production per mountain. So you're losing out that production, but you're gaining a huge amount of science for the early game. So it is a very interesting culture in that you're not getting what you think you're getting when you're picking an influence focused or influence affinity culture. You have no way of generating additional influence. You have to use other methods to try to earn your ethics era star that will award you more points. So oftentimes you end up with less points. Your culture action requires you to have money, and you're not having any way to generate money. Instead, you're focused on stability and science. You're kind of using the Zhou to set you up for greater things down the line. You have a very stable city structure to build a lot of districts down the line, and you have a very nice boost to science that no other culture in the ancient era can sort of provide you, given that you have the right land and geographic features on your territory to help you carry through the ancient, classical, and perhaps even the medieval era with just your Confucian School. So you're kind of planning ahead with this culture. Then for the unit, you have another chariot replacement in the Zhanche, and this is going to require you wheel in terms of technology. You get horses and copper requirement for this as well. It's considered a heavy cavalry. We talked about this already. You get bonuses when charging to non-adjacent units. You can't climb fortifications. It costs 3 upkeep, which is not too high for chariots. I think it's exactly the same as a regular chariot. And you have something called the Mandate of Heaven bonus, which will give you additional combat strength when your stability is high. So there are synergies among all 3 pieces to stability, but no bonuses to influence. And that's going to do it. That's going to do it for our culture guide for the ancient era. We covered all 10. We'll move on to future era, of course, where discussions get a little bit more complex because you have to consider which cultures you picked before. So we'll see how those goes. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And if you did, please remember to drop a like and a comment below to help support the channel. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.